There we go. Okay, so now we're recording. And we wanted to be live, but we're rolling with the Mercury retrograde. So yeah, this is Barbi Jolliffe. Am I saying your last name right?
Jolliffe.
Isn't that so funny how because you and I we were in mastermind together the whole time, right?
Yeah, years ago.
At least for me, the whole time that I was in mastermind with you all for the 5 years.
Right.
You and I were in there together.
Right. And even from those original willow trees.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was kind of late to the scene over there with Kim Summers Egglesey.
Well, so was I too with some of them, but I do remember you coming and doing some yoga and some of that.
That's right. Yeah, that was some of my first speaking I got to do. And yeah, and speaking of conscious relationships, right? Like, what we've gotten to share in mastermind with those women has been so transformative, right? And it's been so beautiful to be in circle with you, watching as you've been building your coaching business and, just really integrating what you've learned and done with your family and your life story and bringing that into your work. So it's been, exciting to be in on each other's growth, right?
Right. Yeah. Learning and growing along the way.
Yeah, right. And that's what, as I was saying before we came on, that I feel like you're someone, not only in your work, someone who is so timely too, that you've followed your inspiration to focus on things like trauma, because it's obviously so timely, right? I feel like people were barely even talking about trauma even a couple years ago, right? The world of psychology was talking about things like PTSD and things like that years ago, but it's very new, I feel like, to be so aware that so many of us have trauma, whether it's like deep, devastating things that can happen to some people, like, some people in your close-knit circles have gone through and you've gone through and gotten yourself through and your family through. And yeah, so thank you for following that inspiration and being willing to be a leader in the trauma, the understanding of it. Yeah. So yeah, what do you feel like because you've really watched that, I imagine just how the world's become so much more aware of this very real thing called trauma, and that you were someone, I think, thinking about it earlier than a lot of us, partly because of your personal experiences, right? But yeah, what are you feeling like you're seeing right now in the views on trauma and your understanding of it?
Well, I think that we were just becoming, we've been becoming aware the last couple of years of how much we've kept it quiet and shut down about people's personal trauma or the trauma within families, the trauma within our world. And then, of course, the pandemic has shut everything down because people can't get out. People can't talk about it. People are stuck back at home. And that trauma is still happening, but there's no way to talk about it. There's no way to get out. There's not a lot of, relief for people. So when the pandemic is over, we're going to have, a bigger mess than ever, because people are going to be going to work. People are going to be, kids are going to get back in school. And so then, we're going to be able to be seeing the trauma that has been kept quiet again.
And what would you say are some of the ways that I can start to imagine ways we might see trauma, right? Even like in kids, for instance, maybe in behavioral issues, right? Maybe a way that we could see a kid acting out trauma. But yeah, what are some other ways that we might see trauma?
The biggest reporter of child sexual and physical abuse is normally a school teacher, or somebody that sees that child every day or is close to that child, a school teacher, somebody that works with them at a school, an aide, a teacher, even the neighbors or somebody that's out and about that sees them, grandparents, a lot of other people. But right now, everybody's home. Nobody's really seeing those kids. Nobody's, even the social workers are not, they're just starting to start making calls again to some of those at-risk kids. Everybody's been home. People aren't, going and making those visits. Kids aren't going to school, so that those little high-risk kids that, maybe weren't even getting breakfast and lunch aren't getting some of that, because, some of them, they're doing the to-go food, but not all of them are, it's just a really sad situation. And even for the, women that are being abused, we're home. We're all home right now. or not.
Yes.
And so it's the trauma is, you know, the abuse and the trauma is off the charts right now. And it's just what it is. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible situation. And it's terrible to say it's what it is, but we are in a global pandemic, and we just have to pray for the best for everyone. And as we're starting to come out of this, the vaccines are, you know, coming out, then we're going to have an even bigger mess than we've already had.
Yes. Wow. And it's like a hard conversation to have, but it seems important. And speaking of being conscious, just being conscious of in our relationship with all of humanity, right? And for us to just be aware that that's the very real truth. And that, yeah, like you said, domestic violence is up more than ever. Suicide rates are up more than ever right now, right? Especially because of what we've all been going through. And then how that also plays out in our relationships, right? Probably a lot of people's relationships may be more strained than ever right now too, right? Just with all of the stress and the trauma and the uncertainty and the fear, right? So just imagining that, whether it's playing out as abuse or on various levels, right? Or just a lot of disconnect, right? Because of just trying to deal with the trauma that we're all experiencing. And I feel like what you're definitely referencing is your awareness of how important the right support is in starting to heal our trauma, right? And starting to understand it, like in that, maybe in the past we had found some things like getting involved with groups or having a therapist and things that, and now are more challenged, right? That can help. I mean, what other sorts of things do you feel like, I mean, how much can our personal work help, and when do we know it's time to get like that professional support and or like the community support? Or do you think it's just not safe to try to address our own trauma by ourselves and with ourselves? Do you think that we really need to be like ready to have someone or someone's in on it with us?
I think it just depends on the individual. I mean, some people can do a lot of work themselves. Some people, some people are really capable, just depending on the level of their trauma and the level of their own inner strength. Some people can do a lot of work, reading books and doing exercises and doing the modalities themselves. Some people do very well, healing themselves and other, but that's very rare. You do normally need some kind of coaching or mentoring, some kind of therapy along the way. But, some people do very well at getting through things. Other people, it's a need, friends or professional help, but just really depends. Right now, a lot of people, of course, most coaching and therapy is online right now, just as a lot of our doctor visits and everything. But for some people, sometimes even reaching out to a therapist or a coach right now is sometimes hard if you don't have a minute to yourself to even have a half an hour, in private at home, because your house is full. Your kids are at school at home. Maybe your spouse is working at home. Maybe there's never any moment, alone at home. I know I facilitate some monthly meetings for a group that I help, with, that I'm very involved with, a survivor group. And the meeting attendance has even cut down some during this, even though we've had to go all online. But some of them, especially my supporter group meeting, has some cut down some because they don't have any privacy right now. And it's really hard for some of them to get on the meeting and want to talk privately when the survivors are still there. And they've talked about that, or they've sent emails about it saying it's just so hard because I can't talk freely when they're there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm just wondering, like, how often do you think our mental health challenges, things that like depression and anxiety and feeling suicidal, are tied into our trauma? Like, do you think that that's very often a cause for those things?
Yes.
And that's why it's so important to resolve, whatever might be our trauma. Yeah. Because it really plays out.
90 to 95% of the people in AA and NA have been abused.
Ah, yes.
So there's
how we try to numb ourselves, right? And to,
and that's all trauma. That's all fighting your trauma.
So what kinds of things do you find yourself suggesting when you get to work with, because you, as I understand it, you work with families, you work with adults, you work with kids and teens. So what are some of the things you might start to recommend to your clients when you're holding that space with them, of acknowledging the trauma that they've been through?
I have an 11 module program that I have written. And so it goes step by step. So that to help them like acknowledge it, work through it, deal with it, and then to start the healing, recognize your triggers, and then start all the healing that goes with it.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. And is that something that you just like to share with the clients that you're working with, or do you have ways that people who, even if they're not your client, that they can?
I have one module that I give away for free, but the rest of it,
I love that
program that goes. Yeah. It goes with my coaching. It's a coaching. That's amazing.
Program. That's so smart. Yeah, like a real solid way for you just know, like, here's the process we're going to use to help you resolve and just really shift this and understand it, and that you're in there with them working through it. But wow, I love that. I hadn't realized you put that together. That sounds really solid. And it sounds like, yeah, it's a really nice way for someone to get a glimpse at how you're going to help them, right? Because it may seem kind of abstract to be like, oh, let's go to therapy or get coaching, which I see what you're doing is both therapy and coaching, in my opinion, right? Even though I know maybe you haven't done all the years and years in the traditional psychology graduate school, but, in a lot of ways, I feel like a coaching approach, and again, even though you do have such understanding in psychology and study, but coaching could actually be so much more helpful to change things than traditional psychology approaches, right? Because often traditional psychology is just like talking about it, and you're kind of hoping that the relationship with the therapist is going to be what's the healing agent, right? But with coaching, you get that relationship with the person that's helping and healing, but you also get this more like solution based, right? Like, I think that's the difference between therapy and coaching. Is coaching's more solution oriented. Would you agree?
Right. Yes, I would. In coaching, I feel like you teach the tools. You teach them tools in coaching to help work through things and to use throughout their life, that they can always go back on, to use throughout their life to get them through the difficult times that come up.
That seems so like amazing. Like, we could all benefit from like trauma training, right? Like, how can we just learn to do this? Because life's going to include new trauma, right? Are there any ways that we can, like, do you feel like you now have more tools to help prevent yourself from getting traumatized from these? Like, laughter is not the best response. It's just what my body's doing right now. But, are there ways that we can help? Maybe I'm thinking it is just some of the awareness and the compassion we can have with ourselves, right? And just kindness with ourselves and others, just knowing that we're going through trauma. But are there any other ways that that you see, or that you find yourself using more to just stay on top of not taking on more trauma than?
Right. You learn, you learn how to deal with your triggers. You learn what your triggers are, for sure.
Yeah.
You learn really ways to not let them get the best of you. And then you learn everyday things of, how to deal with compartmentalize your trauma and things that are going to throw you off. And, you really try those days. We all have bad days, and we all have things that are going to really upset us. We all have, things that really just get to us or really set us back. There's always things that, are really hard, but we have to really, you just really work at it constantly. And we really, you learn how not to just not be able to get out of bed, how not to let the things that life has handed us totally ruin us, and how to, I've had a lot of really awful things happen, but I've also done a lot of work, and have learned that there's also been so many beautiful things to be grateful for. Yes. And how to count your blessings every day, and not, wallow around in your sorrows and what you think of what you've lost and all the bad things. You have to really think about every day, be grateful. I mean, you have to acknowledge this, you have to acknowledge the shock of the trauma. And even if you don't find out about it for 30 years, when it hits you, you have to let your body acknowledge it. Your whole body goes into like a shock, and you have to acknowledge that. You have to go through that step. And then you have to go through the guilt of how come I didn't know, and how did that happen? And you have to go through those steps. But then after you go through all those steps, you have to work through it and let it go, so that you cannot be just eaten alive by it. And that's, and then you have to start going through the steps of the healing, and knowing, okay, whenever I hear this or smell this or think of this, this is going to remind me of that, but I have to get control of that. And so then there's, then you have to start doing self-care every day. Self-care, we do that, we balance ourselves. We do a lot of self-care. We go for a walk. We, stop and smell the roses. I mean, we have to do things that find our own inner peace. And then we have to start healing, and we have to start, doing things for healing. And then we have to start thinking of, what is our future going to look like? What do we want? What do we, and I have a ton of exercises throughout all, of 11 of my modules. And I just finished another one that is called ungrooming, which is a huge, important one, especially for sexually abused people, because, we are groomed, people that are, and the families of pedophiles that are, people that have been groomed, are people that have been abused, are groomed. And so the families have to be ungroomed, which was something I really found that my family had to do. And I find my oldest son still struggles with he is still groomed in a lot of ways. And I see that at times in some of the conversations with him. And so that's a huge, and a lot of people. I have a new client that I'm getting ready to take on, and he's in a recovery center that a colleague of mine has. And in my conversations with him, I can see that he is still 60 years later or 50 years later, he is still so groomed. And so that's going to be a lot of ungrooming in that process with him.
What do you mean by grooming? Will you explain that more? Like what does it mean to be groomed or to ungroomed?
So if you were going to be sexually abused as a child, or even as an adult, the abuser, they befriend you. They don't, not that many people are just like raped or violently abused. Most people and children they befriend you. They gain your trust. They gain your family's trust. So they worm their way into the family. They make they become your friend. They become the best buddy. They become like it could be the family member, the uncle, the grandpa, the whatever. So they do that. They groom you. They groom the family. They buy you gifts, or they, hire you to do chores, or they just work their way. In our case, he was, our family priest. And so, he married us, buried our parents, baptized our kids, came to our house at holidays. I mean, he was really close to our family. So you don't, in any case of anybody that's been abused in that, you will find that they groom the whole family. They gain this unbelievable trust, so the family doesn't suspect, and the kid doesn't suspect, and then they don't tell.
Yes. So what kind of an effect does that have on someone 50 years later, that you could look at someone and say, wow, they're still so groomed?
Because they still have trust in the whole. They almost still feel like they did something wrong.
Right. And that's probably what's so confusing and emotionally traumatic about, it sounds like most of those cases of actual like physical, sexual like trauma is that whole confusing element, and how that messes with us in future relationships, right? It's gotta, with our understanding of love and what's okay and boundaries and feeling safe. And it's just, a
And
lot.
they still will almost defend that person, and they still feel like almost like they did something wrong, or that they instigated it somehow, or that it was, there's.
Wow. And then how that, again, I can imagine could play into our getting into relationships where there may be that dynamic that we play out unknowingly and then get in situations maybe that aren't serving us. But one of the things I feel like is so worth mentioning, as you were starting to say before this, and I'm so glad that you did bring this up and even share a little bit more about some of what you went through with your family, with the priest and molesting your sons, but that you showing up like you are after having gone through that and being someone who's so positive, right, and so faithful, really. And so I'm just kind of wondering how much also because I feel like you're also a very spiritual person, and your spirituality is very important to you, and how much has that been a part of helping you get through that? And do you encourage that with your clients to make that a part of their healing, if that's something that's part of their life? I know you already mentioned things like gratitude, and to me that's such a spiritual practice, right? And just, again, it's helping you show up like you are now after what you've been through. Some people that could have just, right, crushed them forever, and they could have never turned around to be someone now coaching and inspiring others after what you've been through. Like,
right. Yeah. My passion, I feel like going through my trauma and healing my family helped me find my passion, which is to help others and other families heal. But yes, I do. I am very grateful, and I am still very spiritual. I am not Catholic at all anymore.
Right. And that must have been hard, though, that it was in your place of where you were practicing spirituality that this trauma happened, and that you could still feel this connection with God. And it's just amazing too, and beautiful. But go on.
It is. It was very hard. It was very we lost everything, our home, our life, our literally our life, some of my closest friends I still have, but it was, most of my closest friends were through the church. I mean, that was our world, was in this small little environment, and it was very, very hard. And we walked away from everything, and then, had to rebuild, and it was very, very hard. But saving my kids and my family was worth, I would do it again in a heartbeat, because I would have done it sooner. I probably wouldn't have, waited till the twins graduated 8th grade. I probably would have done it immediately if I had to do it again. It was worth every bit of it. It was absolutely worth every bit of it, because, my son struggles, my oldest son struggles, and I've tried everything for him. My other 4 kids are phenomenal adults now. They're and I am so proud of them. And they've all put in so much work, and they do so well. So it was worth everything. But it's been really hard. It's been a lot. I've done a lot of work. My marriage didn't survive it, and that's been heartbreaking. But it's, we're okay. We are on good terms, and our kids are what's really the most important to both of us. And we're going to be okay. We're all okay. And that's, I pray, we both pray constantly for our oldest son, but I've come to terms with that is where that is too.
Right.
And I can't do anything more than pray for my son.
Right. You're at that point where that's the best you can do. Right.
It is. It is. It is the best I can do. And I can't put all this I've done for years and years, so much energy and focus. And I have to, he's going to be 31 in just a couple of days. So, if he ever wanted to really get serious about recovery, there's lots of resources.
Right. Yeah. You're here and ready, and you've been building it. And then, part of why I knew I wanted to talk to you about conscious relationships is because, knowing you over the years, I've seen how you are so close with your kids and so connected, and your adult children, still love to spend time with you. To me, that's success. You're so close with your grandchildren. You're so into it too. You're so you have so much energy to be a mom and a grandma, which I can totally resonate with. I have such that energy too. So, but amazing that, you've what you've done to get yourself to keep showing up like this. But I imagine that your self-care and your spirituality has been helpful and continues to be.
Very much.
Yeah, I'm glad that you found that along the way. Yeah, to help you lead your family through that.
It. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So that's part of what helped you maintain a level of steadiness, is that you were already in a certain place with yourself, with your
I was. Well, I
should say.
Yeah, I always knew, you don't have to go to church to find God. God is, I've always really believed that, and that, so I always knew, you can find God and have a relationship. Your relationship with God is a personal thing, and it's personal in you. So, you can be with him anywhere you are. And don't have to, yes, it's very peaceful. It used to be very peaceful and healing for me to be in the church and do a lot of that, but I had to find that elsewhere. And I, am fully at peace with myself and my relationship. I had to actually forgive him at one point for what happened to boys, but
absolutely,
but that's, everything's fine. I'm fully at peace with myself and with everything. So, and I'm a very spiritual person.
Yeah. And that really models so much for us, how our spiritual feelings of connection can and maybe is always going to be the most healing thing of all, right? That's and to keep looking to that and knowing but then that through part of your connection, you've brought through like specifics, like a module, right? And specific support that can also facilitate the resolving, right? Like with the support of the spiritual practices and
right.
So, yeah, so thank you, for being such a model of it in your own life. And then I love how what you're bringing is so solid and practically helpful and just so timely. So yeah, I want to keep helping make sure people know about how to find you and work with you. I'm figuring we probably have gotten to about 30 minutes. It always does come through easily. But I don't know, is there anything else that you want to say, though, in the name of conscious relationships or trauma or anything? We have time still.
No, I don't think so. I have a Facebook page, business page called Triumph Over Tragedy.
Triumph Over Tragedy.
And I do post some stuff there, and there's a link to my website on there that you can find my coaching program at.
Will you say on your website name too?
Yeah, it's BarbiJolliffe.com.
And it's JOLLIFFE, right? Yeah. I got that because when I posted something earlier, I realized I only had one L in there. I'm like, oh no. So it's your name.com or coaching? Barbi Jolliffe Coaching?
Coaching.
Okay, Jolliffe Coaching, yeah. Oh, great. Well, yeah. Well, I so appreciate your taking the time for this and sharing more about your story and your work. And
well, thank you so much.
I'm sure that there's going to be helpful things here for people. So, well, awesome. And yeah, thank you all for being here with us, catching this later, even though we tried to be live, but this is really nice to be intimate, and now we can put it out to the world. So thanks so much, Barbi.
Thank you.
Have a great day out there.
You too.
Okay. Thanks y'all for being here.